Why can't I get the sound?
Did you? Did you?
I got it on our side.
Mhm.
And that real great area.
Yeah.
Hey. I got my left hand inside. The other side. Here, it's almost exactly. Six.
Serious.
You have to put it out, so you're coming, I do. And
Hey, Kim. Okay, that's
sorry.
For the November 28th work session, city council, and I guess you guys need to do your, the supervisors, you need to do your, you need to call yours in at all and do a roll call or anything. But anyway, I'll call the meeting.
We're gonna run off of your, just off your minutes and we'll attest to them
Okay,
and
So we'll do roll
I
call.
will do roll call.
Abby Hansen. Here. John Hawkins,
Yeah.
Megan McFarland. Here. Matt McKinney,
Here.
Logan Welch.
Here.
Much less from here to Ames, but then Fort Dodge, Spencer.
Yep, so for Park and Recreation, roll call, Chris Kehoe. Alice Appel. Lenny Sosa. Ty Wolford. And Ann Ness, who is absent.
Call for motion to approve the agenda.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Pledge of allegiance. Okay, I guess we're all here to meet about what to do with the whether we want to move forward or do anything, or what the supervisors, I guess, I don't know where we want to start with this tonight, so. Anybody got any ideas where you want to start?
Probably ought to just put it all on the table, get all the information out, make sure we're on the same page. I don't know who would want to relay one information first, but.
Well, the the original idea was that we would look at, the city would I guess the county and the city would agree to start a board that would be an elected board, and would then run the park as its own entity. However, the city and the county would retain ownership of their parcels of land, is the way I see it. That was to be negotiated, I guess, between us and the county. That's basically what was proposed. So anything else from there, I guess?
Yeah, I think the oral commitments that kind of form the basis of the discussion tonight. It's probably formed in that statement of understanding that was made between the representatives of the county and the city. on April 15th this year. That's the basis of this, and in that statement of understanding, which I prepared, I said in there that this is nothing more than just a way to get started in negotiations. Nothing in this particular statement of understanding that was made between city and county representatives through me was nothing more than a starting point to see if in fact there can be discussions going further in the relationship of how we operate and enhance this park. So I think that's where we probably start. There's been commitments made, as you know, orally. They're certainly not binding. We're here for discussion. And there's been some oral conditions made by the Bowden family that if we can put this together, they would come forward with supporting the park. Now, first things first, though, would be whether or not there's an agreement here. There was also discussions that probably got thrown into this since April 15th. And that's the fact of trying to build a heritage or county historical building on the parkland that would be donated by the county. I think we're not there. I think the first thing to decide is whether or not you have a working agreement that can operate to the benefit of both the county and the city. I've been chairman, Kim has been on and active with me on a lot of this discussion in the sense of where we are. And as you can see by what we moved and approved on our meeting of November, which was reaffirmation of the July meeting that we had, was simply to go forward with the negotiations and try to make an agreement, if you can, between the county and the city. I personally see great benefit if the county and the city can come together to agree on the historical history of this county and enhance that through the Pilsen Brewer Park. I think it's a great chance and an opportunity. I don't know if we want that to slip by, but it might, because the decision has to be made here and with the county, and the details often of the devil, and the details of how you work this out between you will make a decision which has to have public support, obviously. Any questions? Either Kim or I. So
I guess, do we want to, so what is, I guess, what are the things that you came here tonight?
You talk louder and it's hard to hear everybody.
Ah,
I don't know if that's,
just
thank you.
So
Much better.
I guess if you know people, if the rest of you got questions that you want to ask about it before we go and start talking about more things, or because obviously there's a lot of things that you aren't sure about. So yes, darling.
My question is, can the city actually do this? With the promises made back in 1932 between that city council and the Bonebright family, and it's in writing, can they actually delegate this operation of the park, maintenance of the park, whatever's going to happen down the road? Can they actually do it? I did send an email to Daniel asking that question. I knew a year back. I provided information. I've given copies of the agreement. I'm hoping that you read it, but we do have an obligation as citizens to take care of the promises we made.
Well, that's probably why we're meeting here tonight, is because that's the hope, is that we're going to take better care of it by doing it this way than what we've been doing. It was the intent. Yes.
Does that eliminate your promise?
Oh,
The promise by the.
it doesn't eliminate our promise because we're not selling the land at all. And the intent is that, and the whole thing with this is, and that's probably the biggest drawback for us, was that, so if the whole thing fails, we still get it back and we still run. It doesn't take away our responsibility for this.
As you know, I work down there. and worked with Kent, wonderful man.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed working there is there was never an adequate budget.
Mhm.
So if you're gonna hire somebody, give them a good salary, you gotta give them a budget to work with. We were spending money out of our own pockets. You can't do that and have a successful operation.
Well, obviously, it needs more than just somebody to run it. It needs more care and upkeep kept up on it too. Which is why we've had a board spending a lot of money there over the last 7 years to try and bring it back up to where it's useful. Or where it's not disappearing, I guess.
One of the things I'd like to see a nice discussion too is input from every board and kind of their stance on this. We as the council have been presented some information from administration, from different boards, the Wilson Brewer Board, internally, and of course, the supervisors have kind of told us their ideas and what they would like to do. I still, to this day, I'm not 100% sure on what the plan is, other than right now we're asking to move forward on a trustee committee. Right, that's the motion that we passed on the last meeting, is moving forward to taking the Wilson Brewer Board and turning it to a trustee committee. Now, that would open the door to allow a lot of things to happen outside of city control. And that's why I'm concerned is what this first step brings us to and what are we signing up for? And that's what I want. I'm not saying it's bad or good yet. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page of exactly what this means, commitment wise from the city, and exactly what this means for the park itself. The Wilson Brewer Park Commission should have the best input of what the needs of the artifacts and the structures that are currently there need. That's what you spend your time, right? You assess the needs of the park. Parks and Rec would have some, interesting information on what this means financially. And of course, the Board of Supervisors, kind of what it means for you guys with your chunk of land and how that would work. So I just like to hear from every board, and then we can kind of start putting the pieces of the puzzle together before we.
Well, let me start, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think that in the motion that we made and submitted, the city and council to appoint the current advisory committee to take over operations might be a little strong, and it might not be in the proper place here in this recommendation. It was strongly recommended only this, that if we're going to have an elected board of trustees next year, that in the meantime, whenever this agreement gets together, if it does, somebody should be the transitional person or people that would be determining from if the agreement is done, say, March 1st, that the park committee could be an advisory position or board to those who may be coming in and elected in November. So it's not in stone here. It's just a suggestion of one way to make the transition. Isn't that your understanding too here, Kim? That was the purpose. I know Doug Bailey was the one pushing that idea and had reasons for it.
There are three of us on the Wilson Brewer Committee that, in July, we didn't know anything about this. It was a big shock. And so we tabled it so we could discuss it. Because there's a lot of moving parts to this situation. And ultimately we decided it's all tied together. The Bowden families generously offered some money, an endowment and a building, possibly, to put some money towards the building. But for that to happen, the county needs to give the land. Well, for the county to give the land and the Bowdens to give the money, there has to be this elected board. So it wasn't an easy decision because I've been on 7 years. Ket has been on several, Lindsay. And we wanted to see this through the end. It's been a long time. And the reality is if it's elected, none of us might make it to this board. It's a big county. But the only way we can possibly have the land, the endowment, the possible heritage is to form the board. Because if there is no board, the rest of the things are off the table.
So explain to me why that is.
That was, do I have an understanding that was the terms of the endowment?
That's the terms of the gift from the county, and they can confirm that. They're here. That's the terms of the commitment of the Bowden family. The reason being that the city has not done a very good job over the past decades keeping this park up and maintaining it. There was over $600,000 spent in the last few years to bring up a park that's been maintained and upkept over the years and had to be in a period of time, but it had to be updated, all of them, all the buildings now except the depot. Courthouse will be updated this year. But if the city is going to run it like they run it in the past, and the council has run it in the past, that's not going to fly. And it's not the council's fault, it's the money and the budgetary problems that every city has when it comes to trying to make sure you get enough money for the essential parts, the essential factors of a city and what's left over. Unfortunately, I think since I've been on this committee and look back in the history, it seems that past councils either were not aware of the condition of the park fully, or secondly, the monies that were donated or at least budgeted towards the parks, that's not only Wilson, but the parks got cut back because of another priority. That's been my thought. Now, I think that's where, I can't speak for the county and the Bowden family, but that's my understanding of their position on it.
And I'm not asking these as like loaded questions. I literally came here tonight to get on the same
All
page.
about
as Ann.
trust.
Right, right.
Let's not kid ourselves.
No,
All
no,
about trust.
and I just want to know what's expected from all parties. And so can I ask you to answer this then? Since the formation of this council, have you come to believe the park has been mismanaged?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'm
Because-
not on the record to say that
Because-
this is blame. This goes back for decades.
No, I understand. And so that's why I take a little offense to that, because just the last 6 years, we made a commitment to, do a lot to this park, and we've allocated a lot of money to this park. And the walking trail, the renovation, the very lengthy renovation, and stuff like that. So like, I think our focus has been on this, on a grander scale than possibly past councils. And I don't blame past councils. I mean, it's all kind of,
That's the way it was.
the news line, the headline of the day, you kind of focus your efforts to other things if needed.
Right.
So I'm not putting any blame there either, but I'm just saying that we have put a lot of money into this park relatively to prior years in the last 5 or 6 years.
No, don't misunderstand. Our committee isn't saying they're pointing fingers at you.
I'm not taking that. I'm just saying like,
Here personally, it's the way it's been. And Gerald.
Well, let me just,
maybe-
I sat in your place for 8 years. I was one of those council members that voted to defund or to take money away from Parks and Rec. When Electrolux closed and we were losing a substantial tax base, we had to make tough decisions. That's the concern, that if we have to make tough decisions in the future, are we gonna do it to the parks again? So that's why we're saying, if we are going to do this, we want some assurances that we can maintain it. And that's why we were thinking that if we had an elected board or an appointed board, whatever you want to call them, they're still going to be, the city's going to own the buildings and the property. The county's going to own their property. If a building gets built on it, who knows who's going to be in charge of that, because we haven't got that far. But at the same time, the Bowden family have come up and want to give a generous gift, but they want to make sure their money is used where they want to use. Not saying that you guys are going to take it away, but somebody else could very easily. And it happens because that's the way budgets work sometimes. When you don't have the money, you have to make cuts, and have all been there. So that's the concern, that if there's an endowment that is generated, and hopefully that endowment will not only be from the Bowden family, but other people will also give to that endowment. So we'll have money to run the park, to make it better, to make it bigger, to make it more inclusive. One of the things that has really frustrated me as a citizen of Webster City and Hamilton County is that we don't talk to one another. We walk by each other like we don't exist. I'm elected by the people in this community. That's all the people in this community elect me to be their representative on the county. When I was on the city council before, we tried to set up and get meetings going together with the county. It worked for a while, and then it kind of went by the wayside. I think that we need to be working together more with all of our communities, so everybody benefits for what happens in this county, not just Webster City, not just the rural parts of Hamilton County, but all the small communities included. The thing that we were looking at was that we're trying to look at what can we do to try to get more cooperation between our parties. How can we talk to one another to try to work together to make it better for everybody? Dean Bowden came and talked to us about what he would like to see. And he had strings attached, and I understand that completely. We thought it'd be fine for us to have strings attached. But I think what we have to do is we have to talk to one another, because we don't do that. I mean, we don't talk to, we don't talk to anybody. We're in our own little world. We worry about what's happening at my end. But we think that if we did some things different, that it would help. When something happens in Webster City, it just doesn't help Webster City, it helps the whole county. When something happens in Jewel, it helps the whole county. So we want to try to push that forward. And that was what we were looking at. I mean, that's same kind of deal we've got with the courthouse. We've committed to put $180,000 to do the repairs on it, but we had to put it into a fund because there was no trust there. Because we said we were going to do it, wasn't good enough or something.
No, I see where you're coming from, Jerry. I guess where I see though is that this is another elected board, and it would keep us from talking. Because now these officials to this board of trustees would now have to answer to their constituents and face the reelection process. And we can just say, so I would think a board of trustees, or not even trustees, but just an operational board of this magnitude. If you really want to kind of bridge those gaps of communication, it would be a collaboration of the city and county, like representatives of our board and your board working together instead of electing another body of government.
But when people are elected to a position, they're held accountable by everyone in the county. So if whoever elects them, whether it's the city or the county, whatever, they are held to the responsibility of what those constituents want.
Right.
The problem that we have is we are working, I don't represent just the rural districts. I don't represent just Webster City. I represent everybody in the county. We all represent everybody in the county. You guys represent everybody in the city. You don't represent anybody in the county. Okay, the thing we're trying to do is let's try to work together to where every community in this county is recognized, to where they and we talk together to try to work through issues.
But we, I mean, with the boards, with Fuller Hall and Kendall Young boards, I mean, if they start having problems, we are called in. It's not fair to say that they're just left to do whatever they want.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
Well, that's pretty well what you said with a minute ago.
Well, what I'm saying is if you're asking to work together more closely, let's work together more closely. Otherwise, what we're doing right now is we're proposing making a whole nother body of government to run this. And if it wants to be a collaboration, you should make it a collaboration. And by the way, the current Wilson Brewer board has those benchmarks, those earmarks. That has a county representative. And I'm not saying that's enough. I don't want everyone to not misquote me either. I'm not saying the county doesn't need to be more strongly represented on our largest and main museum of artifacts in our county. I'm not saying that it's represented enough. I'm saying we do have that in our.
I guess we're not saying that it's an issue that you have to have somebody from the county. Not my decision to do that. I guess what we're saying is let's try to work together. Now, just because we have a board that is elected, 2 from the county, 3 from the city, vice versa, whatever the case is, doesn't mean that we as supervisors and you as city council members, whether you're in Webster City, Camar, Jewel, Stanhope, Stratford, Williams, Flaresburg, Randall, I think I got them all. We could all talk to one another and all meet and try to resolve issues that are going to help our communities and our county. Now, when I was on city council before, tried to convince the county at that time, it was a previous supervisor, that we need to start working together, that when the city does something for like road construction, if there's something that the county's doing, let's try to work together. So we can cut the cost and make it cheaper for us. We should be doing that throughout the county. But for whatever reason, because we don't When I got on the city council back in 2005, 2006, whenever it was, I was told that Webster City is a redheaded stepchild of the county. No one wants to work. Because we think we are the center of everything. Which we're the county seat. But at the same time, we need to get together and start talking to one another, start working together to try to build some community or whatever we can do to try to make our quality of life in Hampton County and all the communities in it. But this is
The,
what we were looking at.
but I mean, to have an independent board that's separate from us means that you're more likely to donate to it than you are if it tied directly to us. That's one of the reasons that these guys put that forward. Was that, you know, you have a better chance of raising funds if it's an independent deal. And that's,
This, John, is that it's a rare entity of any city or county anywhere that has sole responsibility for a park or historical park specifically. And they're all funded through, I mean, just, I'm sitting here going, I have a tourism grant, I have a destination grants, all these things and so on. So you have a group that is focused on those entities there. And I guess cut through the crap, we laid out our things. What we want to know is, what are your expectations? If we do this with this board, and I personally, I don't speak on behalf of the whole board, but me personally, I say, okay, I expect that we'll have some money in that game going forward, and we should. That if we're going to have a piece of the building down there. I've talked throughout the county to people in rural, I call rural towns. And most of the people are excited to have, they have all things.
Not sure how much of it I did.
Well, there is overflow of things that people would like to bring to that building. And so it could be use the destination thing name loosely, but it could. So I see the pushback. I didn't to begin with, but I see the pushback because you're spending your people's money on historical things. Not a lot of people are crazy about it. I happen to be, but there are a lot of people that aren't. So we could sit here for 3 hours, but what we want to know is, what do you expect of us? We've thrown down what we expect.
Well, I think from my perspective, one of the reasons I was one that suggested that we get everybody together in the same room to talk about it. Completely agree that as a city and county, we should work together on a lot of different things. Aside from the question posed about whether it's legal or not, I'm not a legal expert. I can't speak to that. My concern was the way it was worded, the city was going to turn over the operation of the park completely to a separate board. But how does that relinquish the city's responsibility and utilities, the things that go on within that, if things need to be done? Let's say the building gets built and now we need to have a full-time position to oversee the park in itself. That's going to cost money, increased utilities. I'm not opposed to any of this. I think that's why we're here. I think we all want to see that park prosper, but there was too many questions on what does that look like? Without a lot of answers. So that's why I wanted to get everybody together to talk about it. Has there been any discussion in doing that piece, working together as a park in a whole, but you retain ownership of that land, that building gets built and plan joint activities for it? Has there been any discussion in that regard?
Well, we haven't, I guess. I think we're getting the cart ahead of the horse, because until we decide, the Bowden family has said that they want to leave a large endowment. That is contingent on certain issues. And that's having a board that oversees how that money is spent. And so one of the issues is until a decision is made on that, building doesn't exist. It's a dream that people have. It's a nice dream. I mean, we've gone through a lot of different conversations about the building. Does it mean that the county is going to pay for the building? No. If somebody wants to put it, and we're gonna help with the utilities and stuff, I can't answer that because I don't have any idea what it is. I mean, we've been kicking around about the courthouse. Because there was conversation about, years ago that there was an agreement that they were gonna give X number of dollars to do a remodel of the courthouse. Fine, let's do that. Okay, now, what happens if there's something else goes wrong at the courthouse? Who's gonna be on the hook for it? Talk to the county. It's the county courthouse, not the city. It's the original county courthouse. It was just in Webster City. I mean, why aren't we talking to the county about that? Because there's a good possibility we might be able to do some things. But if we don't talk to one another, how do we know what's going on? And that's the thing that we want to do, is we want to sit down and talk about it.
Right.
To figure out how we can make, if there's any way to make this.
To Matt's point, though, how can we be shepherds of the tax dollar, make an informed decision, not knowing the financial implications down the road with this?
Because
That's the confusion.
it's the endowment that is going to run it, not you, not the city, not the county. That's what my understanding is, that endowment would be there to try to help run it.
So, but we don't know the exact dollar amount of the endowment, what the endowment's intended to do, possibly building, possibly not. These are these questions that continually put gray and confusion into what would seemingly be a pretty no-brainer idea. But it puts so much confusion where now it's like, well, now we have this spider web of possibilities. Once we give this control to an elected board of the park, and they do make these decisions, not knowing what we have for budgets to support these decisions. See, that's where we've lost control, and that's where we will have to start making hard decisions on other parks and other general fund needs if that endowment is to the extent where it will support a building and anything that may come from that. And we don't even know what that is.
Well, we don't know if that's
Well,
the understanding. Now, I may be wrong on this, and Dean, you can correct me. There's a talk of having an endowment. Then there's a talk of a possibility of putting up a building. No guarantees. But the endowment was to help run the park.
the
Is
endowment,
that
was-
correct, Dean?
I thought the paper said that the endowment was for the curator only.
I don't know what the paper said. I didn't get it at the time. I guess I don't talk to the paper.
Minutes, yeah, from the minutes.
I guess I'm the one causing all the problems. My problem, it's kind of fun. I'm gonna take a couple of minutes. I moved my family here 46 years ago. I had a vision. I was gonna build a pork processing plant. We did. It's still here. I own property in Webster City. I own a house. I've owned a building, 2 buildings over the years. I've donated to the YSS $250,000 to start that program. And I have a couple of 3 farms that I bought. 2 of them are in the county, 1 is in Webster County. And I got lucky. I've had a lot of things I wasn't lucky on that I've tried. But those farms I bought cheap and now they're worth a lot of money. So between age and compounding and investing and having a vision, I have a little extra money that I would like to give back to this city and this county. That's my whole purpose, is to give back. Because we've used the streets, we've used the roads, we've used the utilities, we've used everything in this county for various things. And that all costs money, and I know that. I sat on that council in 1988 to 1992. Preceding Jerry about 10 years. Back then, I thought, because we were never much apprised of it as a council, that the Kendall Young Park was an existing ongoing thing that was kind of nice, yet they were never open. That's about all we knew. But we didn't know that the city had chosen not to put air conditioning and heating in the buildings. So over the course of years, that didn't happen. And over the course of the years, you saw what happened. The mold and everything got to the artifacts, got to the buildings. And then you're in trouble, and now you had to spend $100,000 to get it cleaned up. I understand you're worried about spending any money for anything because of taxpayers. Taxpayers are on your ass all the time because I don't want to pay any more taxes. Well, Webster City taxes are considered by a lot of people that live outside Webster City to be high. And they are. But we have a lot of amenities in this town that other towns don't have. And I hate to see one of the amenities being that park down there going downhill. It's been closed for 4 years. The city hasn't chosen to build a toilet. We can't even have a toilet in the park, where we have a church that has weddings and open houses, and Carolyn Miller works her butt off to get activity down there. But the city can't even figure out enough to build a toilet down there. Now that's strange to me. Why couldn't a little thought be put into that? And those buildings being closed, people want to see things on a minute's notice. They don't want to see things by having to call. If you want to go to the Clarion Museum, which is, by the way, a great museum, but they made one mistake. They never put any money into having somebody run the thing so it's open all the time. You had to call someone and then pay $20 to get them to see the museum. It's a great museum. How many people have been to the Clarion Museum? None of you people have? Really? Well, you'd be quite amazed, would they not, for you who have been there? That's probably the best museum, one of the best museums in Iowa. There's people in Webster City have displays in the Clarion Museum. Bishop Implement had a Alice Chalmers dealership here for years. He's got a display in there that's 20 foot long and 10 foot high, full of antique replica tractors and all kinds of things. And it says Webster City on it. Great. That's the kind I think of thing that we could have here. Now, the rumor is that if we did something like this, and I was quite appalled to hear this, that one of the city employees told one of the consul, not the consul, but the rec department the other night, that if this thing were to happen, the swimming pool would close. Give me a break. I'm not doing this to make the city pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I think, does anybody know here what the budget is for that park down there right now by this council? Does anybody know? Do you guys know what the budget is for that park? Can you tell me, Logan?
We've put hundreds of thousands of dollars in that.
Pardon me?
We've put hundreds and thousands of dollars into that park over the last few years.
How many?
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent in that park in the last few years?
Correct.
Excuse me.
You don't agree?
It was $50,000 until 2012.
Yeah, and it's
And then
2020.
it's
Sir,
and dinged with the numbers and talked to council evidently into changing it. And I've got all the numbers right here. You know what it is now? It's $20,000 a year.
that's what we
You
budget.
know how many years it would take to do hundreds of thousands of dollars of work in that park?
Do you think the cabins cost $25,000 to refit?
Do you think the city paid for all those cabins?
I'm not saying they did. I'm saying that we've allocated lots of funds to this park. We've spent a lot of money in that park, and we've spent a lot of money in other parks. And we tend to refurbish many parks across the city. We've earmarked
But when there's $150 park downtown because somebody from out of town came in here and had a meeting and blew the hell out of everything, and the paper went wild with two people that said, we can't sell that lot, we can't do this or that. You put 150,000 into that park, you put another 150,000 into the one across the road. It's wonderful. I don't care. I'm not even talking about $150,000. Have you had any other offers for $1 million to work towards saving a park?
No,
No.
What I'm asking you
Okay.
to understand is we have to then understand what we're signing up for. And when, I don't think any of us up here fully know what we're signing up for. And that's what the whole purpose of this meeting was.
No, I think the problem here is you got to ask yourself a different question here.
will have to fight for that.
No, but the different question is for the council is this, is you keep saying, how are we going to pay for this thing if this other board does it? So what if we don't do the other board, are we just gonna do nothing then? Because at the end of the day, this thing still needs somebody to look after it once this is all done. Once they finish the depot and the project just stays as it is, and we finish the depot, and then what do we do with it? Do we just walk away and say, there it is, it's a park, just nobody does anything? See, we used to employ somebody that used to spend most of their time down there. Darling spent years down there opening it up, having displays, people would go there. And that hasn't happened because we've been rebuilding it. And, we haven't done anything with it for years now. We haven't, and obviously we need somebody to start. You see, the rest of the council are all too busy with all their jobs. We can't ask Brianne to go, hey, how about you spend 10 hours a week down here doing this, making sure that the schools come through and all the rest of it. She's got enough to do already.
Let me explain a few things right now, this town is on a roll for new businesses on the south end. I bet you $1 within 5 years, the hotel motel tax will increase and the 1 cent sales tax will double. Because you got 1,000 customers a day coming into Quick Trip. You got a hotel, you got a RV place out there that says he's gonna build 21 service bays, 21. Have you seen any 21 service bays RV places around here? Now they sell parts and they charge for them and they have to have sales tax. John Deere, big John Deere dealership. That's wonderful. Between Quick Star, RV place, John Deere, and who else knows? Carl Chevrolet. They didn't come here because they're stupid. They come here because we got a great highway going through here. That's the second largest traveled highway in the state right now. And we need to take advantage of every part of it. If I owned that RV place and the guy comes in and he says, how long is it going to take to fix my camper? The guy said, well, it takes about 4 hours to service. And he said, oh, shit, what am I going to do for 4 hours? Well, he said, here, take our courtesy car and go uptown. There's a beautiful library. There's a Jane Young house. There's a building called Lift. That's a National Historic Society building. There's a park with a lot of different things in it that you might be interested in. And most of those RV people are curious. That's why they got RV. They don't want to stay in one place all winter long. They want to be on the move. Even Doug Bailey's got an RV now. Every time I come to Nebraska, he's in Illinois. I don't know what he's looking for, but he's everywhere.
Look, I don't want to spend the whole meeting speculating on what we may bring in for tax dollars in the future. I agree. I love your vision of our off ramp and our amenities and how people will see our town and use what we have while they're here. What I want to know tonight is who's going to pay for this if a building's built, how that affects our budget based on the tax dollar. And I'm not afraid to spend tax dollars. I'm just trying to be aware and educated where they're going to be delegated. And I just want to know if we're stuck holding a utility bill or a staffing bill at the end of the day, I want to know what that is now. I don't want to figure it out as we go, because this is that turning point. Once we hand over the control to this trustee board, well, then it's kind of irrelevant to us. We're just going to have to react and fund where we need to. I just want to get that in black and white tonight. Who will fund this ongoing? If anything grows that we'll have to support, staffing, utility wise, whatever.
I think that might be a little idealistic to think that all that can be done tonight. I think the idea that I thought we were talking about tonight is shall we start talking to each other about a possible agreement. Now, if we're going to talk and we're going to say, hey, let's look to these commitments, let's look at the legal questions about whether or not the city can do this, look at those things. And then this is going to be ongoing. It's not going to just happen tonight. It's going to be ongoing, probably on into next year. But let me pick up on John's point for a minute, because this is where I think I've been, and maybe most of our committee members have been. If we just stop here and say, okay, we fixed up the buildings, we got them up to date now. Now, those donors who I personally know gave money to say, who's going to take care of them? So we do have them updated. They're all looking nice. They're going to be good. But how are we going to run the park? And how are we going to keep them up? That burden is going to fall strictly on the shoulders of this city, as it is now. Am I wrong? It's here. So the option, we're at a crossroads. Okay, that's one option. Just say the hell with it. Let's just leave it like it is. We'll run the park and let it go. But you have an opportunity here, a window of opportunity to do something different. You have a chance to enhance Hamilton County Park or the Wilson Brewer Park. You have an opportunity. How do you do that? One enhancement will be a donation of 230 feet by 200 feet property that lies east of the building that the county owns there that's rented out to who? The Department of DHS. That bare ground is 200 by 230 feet. You have a chance to get that. Two, you have a chance to enhance the park because you're going to get a right to ingress and egress from Superior Street. Right now, we're just doing it because the county has agreed. But if we stop, you have no way to get in, let alone to park. Three, you got an option to buy the rest of the land that the county owns now. And we have the right of first refusal if they want to sell it. So you have another opportunity here to enhance the park by bringing in a building and more land off of Superior Street. You have an opportunity and a vision to say this can be this welcome center in the city, can be tourism into that area. This could be a real thing. Four, it broadens the support basis of the monies that we get to support from individuals. You have basically people that either city residents or people who used to live in the city that primarily donated this money towards the 600 and some thousand to the park. But if we have the county involved, we're going to broaden our support basis because there's going to be people that live outside of this city, but within the county, who are going to be having a vested interest in this park. So another provision would be and really important, I think, for the city, is it provides financial resources. Now, those resources are going to come once you establish a working arrangement here. They're going to be talking about things like Logan is talking about. How much will the county give towards it? How much will the city? How can we reach that agreement? But I think we aren't there yet. We have to decide whether we want to do it or not. We want to move forward on it. But it provides a financial resources and it takes the burden from the city. It should. And it should provide new opportunities of funding. It allows the park to grow because you're going to increase the capacity of that park to grow. You're going to have more land, more parking, more access. It provides a catalytic approach to the city because of the Bowden family and other people who will put money towards the endowment of the park to keep it going, together with monies that might go private funds that may well be established for the purpose of building a building for the county on the county land. That's potentially can happen. That allows for more capacity. And we talked about this before on the Board of Trustees. It's very important that we have representation of people who will put their name on the ballot to say, I'm going to be the trustee of this park. You're accountable then, because that's your job. And they have to have a working operation or coalition with the city and the county in the operation of that, which probably would be kind of like Fuller Hall. I think we have a city employee that's on that board with it. We probably will have something like that. ex official, right?
Yes.
Not voting, ex official member who would sit in on the county and the city at the Board of Trustees meeting. That gives you the input and the feedback to the city and the county.
Speaking
I-
of that, look, I wouldn't mind hearing from the Parks and Rec Committee on this. You know, we've kind of dominated the conversation.
Well, I've got something to say about the building seems to be a big thing for everybody, and I'll tell you how the building idea came about. I was here at one of the meetings, and Bob Oliver was saying how he had his ideas of how much was going to be spent on the depot, because he and his group put all their ideas together, and they were looking at $250,000 to put an elevator in the depot, because you can't use the basement for storage or anything unless you have ADR way of getting to the basement. So the elevator was going to be $250,000, and I just said, well, it'd be cheaper to build a building separate to that, and which could be properly made to be air conditioned and probably store your stuff instead of having a basement, which will always be a problem. And that's an idea I just threw out there. And then, of course,
It's all about money, right? It's all about money.
you just
Do you
can't.
agree that maybe this is a decent idea? I don't. Maybe it's not a good idea. But what about these people out here? Do they think it's a good idea or not? I don't know. Evidently, you might want to hear from somebody else. I don't know. But what if I gave you this option? What if I gave you $100,000 a year? I gave you $1 million. And I said, you can only spend $100,000 a year or less, depending on what the needs are to do what you need to do. If you took $100,000 a year for 10 years in a row, out of them $1 million, and you were earning 5% on the rest of the money that's left after you take $100,000 out each year, how long do you think 5% would run you out? Any idea? No?
15 years.
15.
It would take 15 years to run out of the money. Now, if you're a smart investor and you don't give it to a CD at the bank, you probably can do better than that. If you can make 10 or 12% a year, think how far you can run that money out, that $1 million out. Now that's another option. But you still got to have somebody managing the operation, because that's a lot of money, that's a big budget, and you got to have somebody managing it. You got to have people that are thinking about having opportunities. You go down there, you have farmers market down there, you have tractor shows, you have car shows. I would build an amphitheater right at the north end of the park that we have right now, because music draws a lot of people. I've talked to 2 or 3 musicians in town, and they said, wow, wouldn't that be nice to have an amphitheater at the park where people come in? You get 300 people up here now on a piece of grass about as big as this table by the bank on a Thursday night, listening to a couple of guys play a guitar, and half the night is spent looking for a plug-in. So maybe you could get a big bunch of people down there in the evenings listening to music. Maybe you could get some bands to come in. I don't know. That's an opportunity. It would fill in the north end of that park that we now have, and I think would make the park a little more complete. That's just another $200,000. So I don't know. That's my idea of something we could do. Building along that highway, that fills in all of the main of Superior Street. From the highway all the way to downtown, which is a great asset to have when you come into town to see something along with the advent of the new clinic and all of that. It's a really nice complex down there. It would make the town look very good. So, I'm just trying to give away $1 million, try to figure out a way so it would work out, so that it wouldn't cost the council very much money. But obviously, isn't Fuller Hall a trust?
Yeah.
You guys run Fuller Hall?
Some of our budget goes towards it. We employ,
I thought patterning this after Fuller Hall maybe would be a good idea. This is why I really thought about doing it. And I understand endowments. You don't get enough money up front. Churches are endowment poor because they got all this money for an endowment, but they can only spend so much of it. That's the problem with endowments. That's why I brought up this other solution. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Zuemi, you have some?
Let's,
Yeah, I have a question for you. Would you like to see, is your goal to make the park a better place, right? Build some Brewer Park, is that where you want most of your money to go to?
I'm sorry, tell me that again.
I said if Wilson Brewer Park is where you want most of your money to go to improve it, right? So I'm 100% behind that idea. I wasn't okay with creating a new elected board, like we were talking about, but I support that. It's that other part, the building, all this stuff. I think what Dean, from what I hear, he wants to make it a better park. So why don't we focus on just that? Why do we have to, think about the other building, that other land, like, it doesn't.
because of what I just said. To spend $250,000 on an elevator in a building which was never meant to be a museum.
But that's history, right? We're preserving.
But you don't,
history.
but we don't, we preserve the history, but we don't spend $1 million in a building that really doesn't need $1 million spent on. Because that's what you're gonna do.
And we will have to incur the cost of maintenance on anything else that we build, right?
Exactly.
There's always gonna be costs.
Yeah, but the new building's gonna last a lot longer before you need to repair it than the old building. So you're gonna save money and you're gonna have better, you're gonna be able to keep your artifacts in a better place because they'll be in a building which is actually built to stand. Yeah. But that was the whole idea of the other building.
And take on everything and then figure out as we go. I'm more like, this work, let's work making it better and bigger as we go, versus
But-
making a huge commitment.
But that's where we're at the moment. Well, that's why the building actually makes the whole thing confusing. Because we talk about the board and then the board, then the board. So if we're going to do the board, then we do the board. And the county's on with us and we're doing the board, then that's what we're going to do. If we're not doing it, then we're back to where they were, in which case we'll go to the meetings with Gary and I'll suggest that I think you should not spend $1 million on the depot because I really don't think it's worth spending $1 million on. It's worth fixing the building back up so that it's in its original condition and put the artifacts that belong in there to that, but that maybe have everything else in a different display in the other building, which can actually where you can keep stuff that's. So, don't spend $1 million on a building that really and try and make it into a museum, which it can never be.
Yeah, I still feel like at the end of the day, we don't have to go back to where we started. If Dean's saying that he's going to put the money into a bank like Fuller Hall, or like Kendall Young, we already have models for that. I don't know why we need to make it more complicated. We don't have to go back to zero.
Yeah. So you, Logan, you wanted to know from the board, from the Fuller Hall. I mean,
Somebody serves on it, but if anybody else from the board has any input or information.
they're not really, because they're not really the Fuller Hall board, of course.
No, it's the Parks and Rec,
which is
board.
So
Larry, I know you guys have been presented some information by Wilson Brewer and you guys gave a recommendation. At least a motion and a vote, I believe, to move forward or not, in your respectful meeting. Maybe a little, clarity on that.
So from my understanding from that, we did have a quorum. And we give the information to the Parks and Recreation Committee. And what I felt is they didn't have enough time to take it all in. So I think their decision at that time, they did end up not accepting, or not passing it through. But I think a lot of it was based on just the information. The factual information, it was just a lot of information coming in. I don't think they had the time to decide and really look at the facts. That's why I thought this meeting here as well, again, they can learn more about the meeting. I know I talked to Chris over the phone and he was in Colorado and he said he would support it, but he would like to know more about it, to keep moving it through and Mommy, you can explain how you felt kind of.
Yeah, and you talk about facts, Gary said it was negotiable, right? Everything is there. And it's just like Logan said earlier, it's not clear for me. I like concrete things, you know, if I'm gonna make a decision, I don't want my children to take care of it 100 years from now or whatever. So it was fuzzy. You know, I don't wanna make a huge commitment that's gonna backfire at the end, because like Mayor said, we're still on the hook for it if things fail, right? What if they make poor choices, and then we have to carry the compounded interest of those choices? And I like to bet safe. I'm starting to become an engineer, and I don't like taking too much for risk. No, honestly.
My decision at the time, we all had, was more based on the clarity itself too. There just wasn't enough there for me to make a decision, and hour that we met, even an hour and a half, whatever that time was. Of course, we were prevented.
So you've got other business going on at the same time.
Correct. Yeah, there was a lot of business going on besides that. So it was nice that we heard some things that evening. But for me to make a complete decision that evening wouldn't have been fair to anybody. So that was part of my vote, was clarification. And I'm glad we're all here to meet tonight and to hear more of this and kind of put it in a better perspective. It has brought some clarity to me, and I've got some things swirling in my mind now. So thank you for all coming, and that's just kind of where I was at, was clarification of it. So my vote can easily be overturned. No problem there.
So, Mr. Mayor, moving forward, I guess I said it 45 minutes ago, it's time to cut the plug or whatever. So you guys want to move forward on it, we need to find a budget, find out what it's going to cost, who's going to pay for that. The county's going to, and we're not opposed to that. I personally am not opposed to it. But if you're going to come to the county and say, we want funds, we're going to have representation of the funding. That's a fact. So
I have a question. What exactly is the appointed or elected board going to be doing exactly? What are their exact details? Like what decisions can they make if this board is elected or appointed?
I guess I was looking at it the same as the Fuller Hall Trust. How they decide how much money they're gonna spend at Fuller Hall, or how they're gonna manage a budget. Now, the deal is that there was gonna be an endowment there. That's what they were gonna be able to work with. Doesn't mean they were gonna be able to take $1 million and spend it in a week. I mean, it's something that they have to set up and work through, make sure that it lasts over the years. Hopefully, it's my hope, and if this gets going right, other people besides Dean Bott will donate money to it. Hopefully, it's not going to be just $1 million. Hopefully, that board will go out and do fundraisers also to try to get more people to donate to it, to make sure that it stays going. And not just to look at people in Webster City, but look at people throughout the county and all the other communities. The building is the thing that got everybody all screwed up.
Oh, I'm not asking about.
No, I understand that, but people got that in the back of their mind, that there's this building that we've got to worry about. You've got buildings down there right now you got to worry about. What happens if nothing happens? You guys are on the hook for the whole thing. This city is on the hook for everything down at Wilson Brewer Park, just like all the other parks. Now, there's an opportunity potentially that you can have somebody else being on the hook for the funding for those buildings.
That's what scares me, I guess, is that
Why does it scare you?
it could potentially all be on the city.
It's on the city right now.
No, what I mean is everything. I know you said the building, everything. You mean that board has full reins then? We lose all.
Well, I don't think you lose control. You still own the property and.
Yes, Doug.
I apologize for getting here late today. My name is Doug Bailey. Fairly new on the advisory committee. We had an appointment in Iowa City this afternoon, so I got here as quick as I could get here. But so I don't know what was said prior to me coming in. 3 or 4 things. As best as I can tell right now, the city is spending about $35,000 a year on that park. mowing, basic maintenance, that sort of thing, is around $35,000. You spent more than that 2 years ago with the removal of the mold, the remediation of the mold in the courthouse and in the depot. That was spent money, tax dollar money spent there. The line in the document here that asks that the current committee be made forget what it says, to appoint the current advisory committee to take over operations. That is for continuity purposes. If this board could be created, it could be totally brand new people. But our thought was for continuity, to get it going for that first year is what we were essentially looking at for the election for in November, a year from now. But it wouldn't have to be. The county could appoint new people, city could appoint new people. That's not a locked in sort of thing. Kim Anderson and I had created a document for our last advisory committee meeting that was fairly well detailed of possibilities, I guess, that was not really submitted. You may have that document, I don't know, may or may not, it was handed out at our meeting. I know that
It was doing
that Brianna and Larry had a copy anyway. But there's a fair amount of detail in that. But one of the key components of that was this new board would only be asking of the city the same amount of money that you have been putting into it, which is about $35,000 a year, as best I can sort out. So that responsibility is the same.
That's the first time that's ever been.
And that's what I was saying, like,
the
that's what
first
I've been
time it's the
asking
entire
for.
thing that's ever
Okay,
been.
well, that's what I figure.
Yes,
It's always been about money. And what are we going to be looking at? That's what we had. And that's what I don't know that we necessarily took a vote on that, but that was a consensus. Yeah.
But the board would have a budget anyway. They wouldn't just be able to say, well, we got the county and the city on, we can spend $1 million a year.
Can I answer one thing for Abby? Your question about what could this new board do?
yeah.
I just want everything to be simple. I don't think there's one person in this room that has any idea what that board can do at this moment.
Yeah.
So just listening to everything, this is so complicated. And I don't feel like it needs to be. Could the council agree that the council and the county and possibly the Bowdens would get together? Because we've already passed it on saying we think it's worth you looking at Parks and Rec. They have their position. That you could sit down and just talk about, do we want to form or create this new committee? And if so, what would this person or what would this committee be able to do? Because everybody's asking the same thing. What can they do? What powers? So would it be easier to break it down and say, okay, we've approved it. We think it's worth you digging into. You guys sit down with the county and possibly the Bowdens and just go, okay, if we create this committee, what can they do?
And I guess on your point there, maybe the council and the county supervisors have to agree on their budget, what they can spend. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can work through to try to work through this situation to make it work. So you have this board, they're elected, they are saying, hey, we need to spend $100,000 this year and they show us a budget and we don't like it. Say, no, you can't spend 100,000. You can spend 75. Or maybe you say they need to spend 150. I mean, that's something that you can look at, is those are issues you can work through.
But maybe it would be, if you broke it down and said, okay, that's worth a look. We all know what this group could do, and we're fine with it. You know, there's no overreach. You say, I don't want them to be able to do this. The county says, yeah, we agree. So then you could decide if you actually even want to create the board. But that would just put it all down to one little spot, because that's where you're gonna have to start, I think.
There would have to be an agreement that laid out the power that this board would have.
But you'd have to agree with the county before you even knew if you were willing to accept that power.
Yeah, I guess the thing is that we need to sit down and talk and figure out, is this something that we can both agree to? That how do we set it up to make it work? So all of us have a good position. We don't want anybody to feel like we're getting screwed.
So
That's the last thing we want. We don't want anybody to fail. That's the thing too, is that this isn't something that when I look at it, when I was told about it, I'm like, God, that's great. That's a great opportunity. But what do we got to do to make sure that it doesn't fail? That's what we have to make sure. And that's what the county and the city council would have to work together on. And not just that, but the other cities in the community, that if they decide to build a building, that we're going to have rooms for all these different cities to put their stuff in. You know, though it's something that you have to work at. You have to walk through it. It's going to change. It's going to be like a living document. It's not going to be set in stone and say, we're never going to do this and we're never going to do that, because you never know what you want.
So, yeah, I would take everything else off the table.
Yeah.
Sit down with your two groups and just say, is this worth creating this committee? This is what we think the powers are. Yeah, we all agree. Okay, let's go from here. We think we can make this work. Then look at the endowment, the building, the land, all that. But just start at the smallest part, because if you can't agree, then you can't agree.
I would say just one last thing, and that is this independent board, that's what you want to call it. I think that's the key to the fundraising. And clearly, if we're going to grow that park into what it could be, it's not going to be tax dollars that does that. It's going to be private funding. And this board is the key to that, because without that board, I don't think you're going to be able to generate the private funding coming into it.
Yes.
One other advantage that I think the board can give is I spent last 4 years working, planning for the courthouse and trying to figure out what to do with that and so forth. And one of the biggest problems is government, in that it is so hard. Now, think about the number of committees that if you have something you want to get done, how many committees do you have to go to in order to get it approved? And it takes so long to get anything. I mean, the Brewer Creek Park has to approve it. They send it to the Parks and Recreation, they have to approve it, and then they send it to City Council and they have to approve it. And all of this, and then of course you have delays in all of those, because you have to have more questions. Things don't get done. And if you had one group that could kind of make important everyday type decisions without going through this whole change, I think it would help. You could get things finished.
And you can definitely work faster, but when you have different levels, there's also other people views that look at it. So I mean, in both ways, right? If you want to get something fast, it's better to have less decision makers. Right? But if you want to have something more thorough, something where other people give you their perspective, then you definitely need different kinds of people to look at it. But I think there's benefits either way.
No, I agree. Sentiments as well, you know, the speed is expediting things, obviously create results quicker, but it doesn't feel as inclusive. It doesn't feel as diplomatic, if you will. There is some red tape to this process, but I think the key to the delays on this is all not necessarily the red tape, but the gray area. And that's what has held up so many votes, and we've punted so many times on this, and other boards have even, hey, not enough information, or I want to sit down and talk. And it's led us to this discussion today because of the gray area, not necessarily the red tape, but I too, to Ty's sentiment, I've learned a lot tonight. I've heard input and details that I haven't heard before. And I'm slowly putting those pieces together. If I'm in the coffee shop tomorrow and somebody goes, what came out of the meeting last night? What's the plan? I still don't know if I can definitively tell them. I still think we're not quite there, and I don't have enough detail, but let me ask a couple questions and maybe we can kind of put a bow on it. Does the endowment come with a building? No, it's just the endowment, correct? This board will probably have the power to decide if a building's built or not, probably.
Subject to city ordinance and,
right,
zoning.
I'm not against a building, by the way, I'm just asking. And then long-term funding of the building, if a big chunk of that money is taking out of the endowment, that's less interest compounded to fund the park for longer amounts of time. So
No, that's not part of it.
no. So there'd be a building and an endowment?
That was Dean's.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Endowment is not for the building.
So there'd be two different donations, one for operations and one for possible building. If that's what, okay. Again, it's never been like cemented, it's always been kind of maybe assumed and alluded to in the last meeting, but I don't know any of this for sure, so. Okay, those are my questions.
So we're deciding whether we're gonna meet with you guys or not. That's basically, do they want to meet? Do we want to meet with them to look at moving forward with this board or not? I guess.
So I guess you guys need to sit down and figure out what questions you want answered
Well, that's,
when it comes to how do you want, if this board is set up, how do you want it to run? I like what Kim has to say is that they would have the power to run it, but it has to be approved by both entities. That way they're not going out and doing whatever they want. Because that's your concerns. They're gonna go out and do something that you don't, that 15 years from now, you may get stuck with. Not knowing about it until it's too late. I don't think any of us want that to happen. I think what we're looking at is that I think that's a really good idea, is that to have the council and county, if this comes together, oversee it and make sure that it's within the budget.
Yeah, I think that's a key part in my mind is if we can formulate something there's some control versus they spend $1 million the first year and now we have to figure out how to fund it the rest of the way. I feel much more comfortable with that. I'm certainly willing to sit down and talk with the county on what does that look like? Maybe you like what you said is correct. Maybe we kind of have to talk as a city. This is what we want to see. You guys come with your ideas when we come to a joint meeting. I guess the only other question in my mind is, can the city legally do that? I mean, that's been brought up. I think we have precedence with the Fuller Hall.
we also have precedents. We must have a precedence from when they sold that land years ago.
Yeah.
How did they manage to do that?
Yeah, how did that?
So as long as
City
that
sold the
question
land, sold the
gets
land
answered.
to the state to build a armory on. They should have never done that.
Yeah.
So that's
I
the.
agree to that. I think that you need to have exact.
But we'd like to know the legal standing.
I want some black and white questions brought before us.
Yes,
I thought I saw that you guys hired a firm, legal firm. In case this moved forward, you can get some advice.
Yeah.
Why can't you ask that legal firm if this can be done by the city?
Well, I think that's the intent. We've just had so many more questions than answers. You didn't know what you were gonna go and ask to the legal firm. I think that was the purpose of getting this group together tonight. To try to answer some of those questions so that you can then go back to your legal representative with the right questions.
I think we didn't know all the questions that were gonna come up. We had no idea.
We still
I
don't.
mean, yeah, we have. I mean, it's, the nice thing is that at least we're sitting there talking about, is this a possibility? Possibly.
Yes.
Is it a promise? No, it's not a promise.
Yeah. Yes, Tim.
You keep saying you want more answers. What do you want to know?
Well, they just want to know answers of how the whole thing goes
Huh?
together. We just need to know how the whole thing comes together now is what we need to come up with the rules and regulations and all
So
that.
they're concerned about the building being built. Who's gonna do
No,
that?
they're not concerned about it.
No, they're not.
No.
What if I said, yeah, I'll build it if it costs me less than $1 million? Now I have $2 million in this deal.
You've got more than that in it.
Big deal, huh?
You've got more than that in it.
But you want, this all started when John said, well, we're not gonna put an elevator in the, what do you call it? Because it's dark and dungy down here and it costs $150,000 to put an elevator to take the artifacts to the basement of the depot. He said, I think we ought to just bring in one of these corn cribs that these farmers have, one that blows over. Bring one of those round buildings and put back there on that lot, and then we could store all our stuff in there. I said, wait a minute, I got a better idea than that. We ain't gonna put no steel building back there on that beautiful lot that the county wants to give us. It's worth $100,000 the way it is. You don't want to put retail back there, I don't think. That'd really be good for your park to put retail back there. I look at this addition to this park as not something to take away what we've already got, but to enhance what we already have and give us more opportunities to do more things in that area, and that's what will draw people. What you have now is 6 site-specific buildings. One, if you're interested in railroading, you got that. We got a caboose down there that had, I own half of that son of a buck. John owns a little bit of it. Rose owns a little bit of it, but everybody was happy when we brought the caboose in. Now they're unhappy because they can't get in it. Yeah, we'll get there. But my company has 250,000 plus my partners already in that park down there. That's just sitting there, and there's only been $750,000 raised. My company has 1/3 of the money in there right now. And so, you know, we're very, very serious about what we're doing. If I give $1 million, I'll bet you somebody's gonna see the light and start giving a little money to preserve our heritage in Webster City and Hamilton County, Iowa. That's all I got to say. But if you've got questions, you call me. I'll give you an answer.
Yeah.
Can I just add a couple other things and maybe might clear up some of this? I think the question Darlene raised needs to be examined. But in reading the understanding of how that gift was made, it was a conditional gift given to the city with the promise that it would be forever kept in perpetuity and owned by the city, not sold. So I think that where we are is you probably can't talk about selling it to anybody or conveying it to anybody. You can't convey the land to the foundation or any of that. I think we're back where the county has to keep their land, the city has to keep their land. And you have to set up, if you set up a board of trustees, you certainly have the power to determine what powers they have. And any decision they make has to be probably approved by both the city council and the board of supervisors. So I think you can put safeguards in anything, such as the power of the trustees, if that concerns you. But I think the details are always the toughest thing to iron out. And we have to, first of all, decide whether or not we're going to do this. That's the concept. Then we work, if we decide we want to do this, then we got to put the manpower and the time and how to make it work. And that's going to require a representative from the county and a representative from the city, unless you want to meet as a board in a public hearing. But probably at least a representative or two from each. You don't want to, you have to have only one, don't you, Jerry? But I think you've got to start the discussions and talk to each other and go from there. Because the details and some of the things you were raising, Morgan, I think are down the road for sure. But let's see what we got here, first of all.
But the details
That
we
makes
have to
sense.
look at.
Yeah, I think
Details you have to look at.
you're going to be deciding, okay, we can do this. Now let's find a way to do it. And what's the wording we're going to be using and the power we're going to be giving to these people.
Darlene?
You can build in all the safeguards you want, as long as everything's out in the open. But if you start proceeding in secret again, like it's happened, and let people put a cloud on this. That's not, good. We need everything in the open. No more secrets.
The Park and Rec Board, what did you guys decide? Are you happy to go ahead with the board now, or have you changed your votes on that, or? I just, is that unreasonable to ask you that right now? I guess that's another thing.
I'm speaking on part of my thought. 18+ years on the board, looking at going through exactly what was brought up. Budget, take it away. Budget, take it away. The opportunity has presented itself, I think, with the building being separated. That was some of our concern as well, is how it got interpreted. It was all one package. I had some concerns, me personally. I think most of the commission did as well. So I have, me personally, and they feel themselves, I have no issue going forward with getting that agreement, trying to figure out where we're at for that type of endowment.
Yeah. So you guys, what would you like to do?
Well, I feel like I have a lot more answers than I had when I started, and having some safeguards in place with whatever would be formed, I'm committed to moving forward with discussions with the county.
Yeah, I'm fine moving forward. Again, I think not till late in the fourth quarter of this discussion where we started talking about this board of trustees possibly having some oversight from the city council and the county supervisors, did I start even feeling any way close to comfortable on this. But with us being able to tailor and tweak the makeup of that board and its bylaws or its infancy, I'd be comfortable discussing with the county what that would look like.
What do you think, Abby?
And the trustees that we're talking about are already in existence for the foundation. We have a foundation, and legally on the foundation, we have to make sure it gets tax exempt. It isn't yet, but it should be in the future.
We'd have to.
Now, board of trustees, or if you want to continue to use the foundation as the board, that's fine. Or you can just do away with that and set up a separate board altogether. But right now, the concept was the board of trustees of the Wilson Brewer Park.
Right. And as of right now tonight, I'm only comfortable talking to the county about what this would look like and how we can make it comfortable for generations to come on endowment or no endowment. 10, 20, 50 years down the road. That's where I'm at.
The only way you can do that is make safeguards in your agreement.
Correct. And that's what I'm comfortable talking about.
So we're not even sure we can hold an election.
Yeah.
So we've got questions in the
Yeah, that's right.
Secretary of State to find out if that's an option. That may not be an option. So we have a lot of things to go through before this is final.
Megan, what?
So there's a lot of talking to be done.
I think we should move forward with discussing it for.
So the consensus from the council is that we want to meet with you guys and continue the discussions on it. So when would you like to meet again?
We'll work out schedules. So once we get you guys do what you want, and then we'll work on it.
Okay. So we'll need to try and nail it down. And I guess what we need to do is really look at probably the Fuller Hall board.
I was gonna say, like,
It's probably,
agreements.
I mean, the Fuller Hall, the way it's drawn up, that's probably a first place to look because we've got it. It works.
Framework.
And, we've already got representation on there, so. I guess we'll get that and give it to you guys too, so you guys can see it.
Okay. He just showed that to us.
Yeah. Okay.
Consensus, but Abby, what are your thoughts?
No, I said I agree.
Yeah.
I think we can do.
No, we're not doing motions. Yeah. So, but we've got a consensus to go forward with it, so that's if we need to.
Obviously, as a member of the board, with its part, I certainly thank you for taking the next step and trying to work out an agreement. And once you get that worked out, then the details, I think.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's been good. So thank you. Motion to adjourn. Absolutely. Good. All those in favor say aye. Person. I think that's how much shit. Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Oh, I did for you. Oh, yeah. I'm still not retired. Well, just. Something right here. It's not. That's. Sure. That's healthy. That's it. Yeah.